There we go. Fraidy, thank you so much for bringing us all together. And I first of all want to congratulate Kate for this amazing movie. It is really impressive. We're here in the context of CSW 2021, which is all about female leadership. And if there's one thing to be said, the 4 women on this panel are truly leaders, I think. What I found amazing, having watched this film now twice, is that I always, I've been working on ending child marriage for a decade or so now, and it's always about these 12 million girls, and that number is increasing because of COVID, who get married every year. But this film, I think, in the most respectful and at the same time most kind of hard incoming way in your heart, shows that this is about more than numbers. This is about individuals and about how this affects their lives. And I also found, Kate, and I want to congratulate you for making that so clear, that, as is said, this is about girls, women from all ages, from all backgrounds. But what kind of is remarkable is the absence of love in each and every one of these stories. Anyway, Kate, Fraidy, Sarah, Nina, we're delighted that we're going to have a conversation. We have little time. We have 40 minutes or so. I know that each of you is going to be brief and brilliant in what you're going to share with us. And what I would like to do is focus on 2 things. Talk a little bit about the film first and about your personal stories, and then move on to talk about what you're doing now, because each of you is an amazing advocate in your own right. And I think the audience would really love to hear what you're doing and what they can do as well to stop this terrible thing from happening in the United States. Really quickly, the facts and figures. Between 2000 and 2010, about 25,000 child and forced marriages took place in the United States. We know that the vast majority is girls under the age of 18 marrying with adult men, and often with a significant age difference, as became clear in this film. We also know that the number of forced marriages, we might even know the exact number because they're sometimes harder to measure, and we'll be talking a bit about that. And I think what is really important to acknowledge here, what became clear through the film as well, until recently you could get married before the age of 18 in each and every state of the United States. It's good that this has changed and that now in 4 states and 2 territories have ended child marriage, but that's not enough. There's a lot of states to go. And then there's, of course, the issue of forced marriage. Let me start, Kate, by asking you about the film. This is your first feature film. Why did you make it?
Well, I have a lot of experience both in narrative filmmaking and in advocacy. And when I discovered that this issue, forced and child marriage, was still such a huge problem in the United States, I was shocked. And I really wanted to use those storytelling skills to create a platform for survivors to be able to share their stories so that people would be able to better understand all the complexities and nuances that are involved in this very, very important issue.
And Kate, I saw while we were showing the film that there were a lot of people asking, where can I see it again? I want to share this. I understand it has gone to festivals already and got some awards. Can you tell us a little bit about what the plans are, and can we see it again? What's the story?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So it's been on the festival circuit for just about a year now, almost to the day. A year ago, the film won Best Feature Documentary at the Manchester International Film Festival in the UK. Currently, we are still working on pitching to platforms to find a way to get it to a wide audience. But in the meantime, we do post updates on our Facebook page and our Instagram in terms of independent and screenings and additional festivals. And this is such an honor to be here for this event and honor to share it with all of you.
Thank you, Kate. Nina, I'd like to turn to you. I mean, I found one of the things that you said in the film, you talk about the people who normally should be your protectors are actually your prison wardens. I found that so worrisome, and you must have been in a very, very lonely place. Now you point out that you were actually 19, I think, when you got married. Can you help us understand a little bit about the difference about child marriage and forced marriage? And also, I saw in the chat there was a question about the difference between arranged marriages and forced marriages. So could you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So like myself, like Fraidy, was 19 when the marriage happened. And what is so often a theme among these, both for children as well as adults, is a grooming towards compliance with an authority figure. So whether that's a parent or a religious authority figure, to comply with their wishes, as well as a, complete erosion of a child or adult's self-agency, or the ability to say no without consequences. And I often like to explain the difference between a forced marriage and a consensual arranged marriage is that when you have consequences to saying no, that's coercion, that's force. You should be able to say no without any consequences, and in fact, with full support of the people that are, trying to arrange the marriage or assist you in finding your mate. So, that is one difference there. Also, for something that is different for children being forced into marriages or coerced into marriages versus adults is, one, they're more vulnerable just by the sheer fact that, they're children, and they have so many less rights, so many less options for avoiding the marriage in the first place. They can't run to a women's shelter. They can't go and apply for a restraining order. And then once they are in the marriage, they still face those same difficulties for having a lack of services or a lack of support to get out until they reach the age of majority. And, that creates a scenario where they have, the young, especially the younger they are when the marriage takes place, they have significantly higher risk factors for adverse outcomes.
Thank you. Sarah, you spoke about that, the fact that as a kid, you actually don't know why it is wrong. At some point it feels that it is wrong. But you also, the film shows that this is not just, a child marriage isn't just about a relationship between you and a man that is involuntarily, but that it has huge consequences for the girls, for the women involved. Could you talk a bit about what it actually meant for you as a human being?
Yeah, well, first I would like to say that, the consequences of child marriage are often lifelong, and sadly, it's a common theme between all child marriage survivors and forced child marriage survivors. Children who marry under the age of 18 are more likely to suffer from abuse, isolation, depression, lack of education. And for me, it really started with my reproductive and sexual health rights being stripped from me on my wedding night. And this was really due to the huge imbalance of power in our relationship. He had all the power. That meant he controlled the finances, my healthcare, my kids' healthcare, and especially my own body. I didn't have control over my own body. I was told that birth control was not something that God wanted us to have as women. If we were meant to have children, that would be God's will. I also didn't even have the ability to access birth control. And really, I didn't understand what the meaning of consent even meant for me. And I think that's a really big issue that many girls struggle with at 15 and even older. The real long lasting effects were the psychological impacts. I was extremely isolated and depressed most of my marriage. I was taken out of a country, out of the country that I lived in, away from my family, to a country where I didn't speak the language. And still, I suffer from PTSD to this very day, anxiety, sometimes depression. And for me, I also think the biggest impact that it's had is on my education. I really had dreams of being a lawyer as a child. I used to read John Grisham, as lame as that sounds, but I really had a vision of me going to the Air Force and then to law school. That was my vision as a 15-year-old. But when I was married, I was taken out of school. That was the last time I went to regular high school. I had to fight so hard to just go back and earn a GED and get those rights that people just kind of take for granted. It's really taken me so many years to recover, and sadly, my experience is not, you know, uncommon. This happens across the world, and you know, we're 3 women here telling our story. And my sister recently watched this movie, and I asked her what she thought after she saw it, and she said, you know what, it was like watching 3 other women telling my story. And so that's the sad part, is that it's just a common theme with so many survivors of this horrendous and horrific abuse.
Sarah, building on that, and I mean the heartbreaking comment also that your sister made, there was a question in the chat about saying, look, all 3 of you had to deal with religious extremism. Are there other settings, social settings, in which child marriage takes place? And I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, Sarah, or if Nina or Fraidy will want to come in on that. And then I'll move on with a question for Fraidy, if that's okay.
Yeah, I'll start, and I will just say that it happens across all strata, social, economic, religious. It really comes down to power in a relationship, and it comes down to patriarchy, and it happens all across the world for so many different reasons. And I'll let Fraidy and Nina talk more about that.
Fraidy, where was rebellious Fraidy that day, is what you say in the film about your wedding day and about that phase of your life. And I only know you as a rebel who is making amazing change happen. But before we go to everything you're doing right now as an advocate, I'd love to hear if you could talk a little bit about your own experience, which you already do quite a bit in the film, of course. But in the past, I've heard you talk about how forced marriage leads to other kinds of abuse. And Sarah talked a little bit about what that meant for her. Could you elaborate a little bit, please?
Yeah, sure. And again, you know, as Sarah was saying, there, you know, Nina, Sarah, and I come from such different backgrounds, but there are some similarities that you see through our stories. And you see that forced marriage at any age just often means a lifetime of rape, abuse, domestic servitude, and it just really comes along with so many other forms of abuse. In my own case, for example, as a bride, I was subjected to a virginity exam to confirm that my hymen was intact. That's another human rights abuse. Like you've heard before, I was required to have unprotected sex with my husband. That means a loss of sexual rights, a loss of reproductive rights. It also means forced motherhood. I was forced to have my children. I love my children, but that doesn't take away the fact that it was not my choice to have them. Under religious law in the Orthodox Jewish community, I also didn't have financial rights within my marriage. I was not allowed to have my own bank account or credit card. I also had limited legal rights under Orthodox Jewish law. My husband could divorce me, but I didn't even have the legal right to end my own marriage.
And Fraidy, talking about kids, and I guess this is a question for all of you, but there was a question in the chat about, did any of your former husbands try to keep the kids? And are these men still in contact with the kids? So could you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I can say that, you know, for me, I won full custody of my children early on, and I was very lucky in that, because a lot of women in the Orthodox Jewish community who leave the religion, as I did, and leave a marriage, and men who leave the religion and leave the marriage, end up losing not only custody, but any meaningful relationship, any real visitation with the children. It's a really serious problem in the Orthodox Jewish community. But I can tell you that we've been divorced for more than a decade, and the fight continues. Legal abuse is real, and my ex-husband, I have a final restraining order against him, so he cannot continue to stalk me and try to kill me as he used to do, but now he just does it through the courts.
Nina or Sarah, you want to come in on this issue of children and the relationship with the father?
I can jump in on that one, as well as, you know, I still have to have a certain amount of contact because, again, the courts don't understand how forced marriages really work, and there's no precedent for it. So that's where they, when I refer to, they go back to divorce law. So I have full physical custody of my children, but I do have to share legal custody. So major decisions involving medical care, schooling, you know, things of that nature, I have to share. The benefit for me is that because my beliefs are more mainstream now, it is more likely that the court will side with me when I do have to go to court to fight for things like schooling or medical care, or therapy for them. And, but it is a fight. It's still a fight years later. And, you know, it's an enormous financial burden to continually have these long court battles because they don't want to give up, you know, the children. They want to raise them in that same belief system.
Right. And I would have to agree with, I would have to agree with Nina that, you know, there's a certain aspect of control that goes into a divorce proceeding, especially, well, for me as a 23-year-old, when I was trying to leave my ex-husband, I really had I had to start from zero. I didn't have an attorney. You know, I filed for the divorce myself. I really didn't know what it meant to bring a legal action. And when I went to legal aid, I didn't get the help that I needed. I gave up everything. I ended up with tons of financial debt because he had taken out credit under my name. I'm still recovering from the financial abuse that I suffered. My kids have obviously suffered because of that. He tried to keep my children from me. He tried to take them out of the country and keep them in his country. I had to fly and fight for my children in a country that I was not a citizen of. And then I had to fight for them in court with little resources. We do share custody, but he's really, since he left the country, he's really not been participating in their lives except to make it harder on us. And unfortunately, that's a very common situation that happens, not just with me, but so many other survivors that I've spoken with. You know, the man really tries to just make it really hard to leave.
Kate, a question from the audience about the meaning of the red thread. Would you mind elaborating?
Absolutely. So that was a stroke of genius on the part of our amazing production and art designer, Chris Cook. She had studied a lot of different meaningful visual symbols, and she found, I believe it's in certain Japanese cultures, this symbol of the red thread being a lifeline and being like the thing that ties your life together. So we were using that as a way to kind of have a dual conversation about the life that one lives, but also obviously the entanglements and the entrapment that happens first very subtly, and then before you know it, you're completely overwhelmed, sometimes without it even realizing it.
That's beautiful. And how did you find these three amazing women?
So I fortunately had known about Fraidy through working at the Tahari Justice Center in communications. And so I reached out to her early on in the process to both see about whether she would be interested in participating, but also to try to identify people who would want to share their stories. We wanted to make sure that the stories we were telling were from people who were feeling ready, who wanted to advocate, who were in a point in their lives where they felt like they had agency over their stories. And so that was, we had a lot of conversations about that throughout the process.
And I mean, again, Fraidy is an activist, so I'm not surprised that she was happy to join. But Sarah and Nina, did you have doubts at any point? Did Kate have to work hard to convince you?
Yeah, go ahead, Nina.
I did not. Kate did such an amazing job the first time that we got on the phone of really, you know, validating my experience, validating my feelings, explaining what her take was and what she wanted this film to represent. And just a fantastic, you know, like trauma-informed, survivor-focused, you know, response to everything that she did. It did a huge amount to build trust right from the beginning.
Sarah?
Yeah, I thought Kate and her whole team were just extremely respectful of our stories and how we wanted to tell them and not to re-traumatize us. And I think that, you know, prior to meeting Kate, I had been advocating for about a year and a half, sharing my story publicly. And in that process, I had worked with other, you know, media sources. And I had never been treated with that level of care that Kate had shown. She just made it very comfortable. And, you know, really, I felt a part of this process. And I'm just so grateful that I've been able to become closer to Fraidy, Nina, and Kate. You all are just, I feel like you're family. So,
Fraidy, did you know these? Did you know these ladies beforehand? And I mean, is the feeling of family mutual? How does that work for you?
Well, first, I just want to clarify one thing. I was extremely skeptical when Kate first reached out, and I did not at all jump on her offer, because I get a lot of offers from filmmakers who, there have been 3 big films coming out that just completely fell apart, and then so many producers who reach out and want to sensationalize the issue and not treat it with the respect that it deserves, and not understanding the complexity of this. So the first time I met Kate, I saw that she was different and she was serious, but at first I was not jumping to be in the film. So I want to clarify that. But yes, I mean, it's just one of the really beautiful things about being in the film was just, you know, it's just such an extraordinary piece that raises awareness in such a powerful way, but also for someone like me, you know, shunning is a very real form of honor violence. And I don't know if a lot of people can understand what it's like when your own family declares you dead. I come from a big family and I have no contact with anyone in my family. And so for me to find this new family has just been a beautiful experience. And Nina, Sarah, and Kate, I just hope you know how much I appreciate your being my new family.
Let's talk a little bit about the activism that all of you are engaged in, and what you believe needs to happen in the United States in order to make sure that these horrendous stories don't keep repeating themselves over and over and over again. Kate, maybe I'll start with you. I mean, how are you planning to use the film to help change happen?
So I'm hoping that it will help raise awareness. We are just going to continue to do everything we can to get it out in front of people, and then prompt conversations and build that advocacy. Because like Nina mentioned earlier, this is a multi-tiered approach. So what I'm really hoping for with the film is that we continue to inspire conversation. We continue to challenge those preconceived notions that are damaging to understanding the full context of this problem, and create real cultural and societal change in people's minds and hearts, so that, like Nina said, when you do go to court or you do introduce legislation, people have a stronger understanding. So yeah, I would just encourage people to have those conversations. I think you'd be surprised how many people around you in your life may likely have experienced something akin to this.
And I think you really deserve praise for having made this film, because I do think it provides an amazing tool for change makers to help people better understand and the nuances and where I think the fact that you made it so carefully really comes in. Fraidy, you are going state by state. What are you doing? What is the big vision of change? And how can people help also if they want?
So at Unchained that last, we kind of attacked the problem of forced and child marriage with a 2-pronged approach. On the one hand, we help the individuals in the United States who are in or facing a forced marriage at any age, from any culture or religion or community, who needs help either escaping from an impending forced marriage that's being planned for them or getting out of one that's already happened. And then at the same time, we are just pushing relentlessly for social policy and legal change. And we are so grateful that this movement that we started to go to all 50 states to eliminate marriage before the age of 18 has finally gained momentum. And as you saw in Knott's, 4 states so far and 2 territories have with us an extraordinary amount of work from us at Unchained at Last and the allies, you know, all the people you see here today and a lot of the other people watching and others who couldn't be here today. An extraordinary amount of work went into doing that. So we have 4 states down, only 46 to go. And I urge everyone, go to unchainedAtLast.org and look up the status in your state and look at the different ways that there are some simple ways that you can get involved just quickly. And then there are more long-term ways that you can get involved. It takes a village to end forced and child marriage in the United States. Please be a part of that village.
And Fraidy, just to elaborate on that, because you said there's on the website, you can go there, because there was a question like, what can students do? But so basically, depending on where you live, because this is all regulated at a state level, you say, go to the website of Unchained at Last, look at that particular state where you live, and you can then see what kind of action you can take in terms of writing to legislators, etc. Is that correct? It's really state by state?
Yes, so we're legislating, there are 12 good bills pending right now to end marriage before 18. And so we have noted which are those states, and then we have specific actions in those states. But even if you're not in one of those states, or if you happen to be one of the lucky ones from a state that already ended child marriage, there are other things that you can do. We have that all on there. And if you're a student, we have really extraordinary internships where you can really be a part of this movement, speaking directly to legislators to urge them to end child marriage. So apply for one of those. Very competitive, but go ahead.
Let me ask you one more question about this whole issue of legislators, and before I go to Nina and Sarah, and that is, there was a question about, is the hesitancy in some states to change the law, is that linked to the fact that legislators might see this linked to religious ideology and therefore too hot to touch, so to say?
That certainly is something that we've heard from some legislators. We've heard some really awful things from legislators. We like to call them vomitosis excuses that they give for not ending child marriage. And absolutely religion is one of them, which is absurd because almost every religion has come out in support of ending child marriage. But really the biggest hesitancy, the biggest vomitosis excuse that we get from legislators is, girl gets pregnant, she's got to get married, even if she was raped.
Sarah, what are you doing and what would you urge others to do?
Yeah, so I have been advocating for this issue since 2017. When I first heard about child marriage, I was kind of shocked that it was allowed in the US, even though it happened to me. But at that time, it was legal in all 50 states. And that's how I connected with Tahirih Justice Center and Unchained at Last, and started advocating alongside their efforts. And, since then, 4 states have ended child marriage. And what I do is I testify in support of these bills as they come up. And Unchained is very good about organizing those efforts. And I try to share my story as much as possible, because I think the more people that know about this issue, the less stigma there will be for people like me. And it's surprising the comments that I get, because at first they'll be like, wow, I never know that happened here. But then they'll think about it and they're like, oh, you know what, this happened to my aunt, or like my grandmother, this happened too. So once people start connecting the dots, then they really start wanting to get involved. And there's so many ways for people to get involved. I saw that question about the students. There's studentsagainstchildmarriage.org. There's the National Coalition to End Child Marriage in the US. There's the California Coalition to End Child Marriage. And I also work alongside with Global Hope 365. We're trying to end child marriage along with Unchained at Last in California, which currently doesn't have a marriage age limit to get married. So you could be 2 years old in California and get married, unfortunately.
Incredible. Nina.
And so currently the biggest project that I'm working on is actually as a member of the Michigan Coalition to End Child Marriage with Fraidy. And there's a bill in committee that we're hoping this year to, go into law. So here in Michigan, we also don't have a floor. A judge can approve any age of a child to get married. And so we want to raise that all the way up to 18 without exceptions. I also advocate in every avenue that I can. So events like this connected to the film, speaking to legislators, speaking to media, pretty much any opportunity, and a lot of word of mouth. It's pretty hard to have a conversation with me and not end up talking about child and forced marriage, because of that, I've had people call me and say, hey, I have a 16-year-old girl here in my living room. Her father's threatening a forced marriage. What do we do? And I say, I'm on my way. And we connect them with services and, direct them to Unchained at last or Tahari, whatever is going to fit their need. But what I would really like to see change is that when I start having these conversations with people in the community or with service providers, like schools and, women's shelters, that instead of them saying, no, that doesn't happen here. I can't imagine that a forced marriage is happening here. I'm like, well, it happened to me. That instead their response is, oh, I know it is so horrible. In fact, we just sent an email off to our legislator, or yeah, we just talked to a friend of ours. They were trying to, force their pregnant child into a marriage just because she got pregnant, and we were able to talk them out of it and connect with services. I would love service providers to be like, yeah, we just rearranged our service model so that we can start providing the services that victims of forced and child marriage need. And that's honestly the type of change I would like to see.
It's interesting, Nina, what you're describing reminds me of some of the work that's being done internationally. And that is that if we want to end forced and child marriage, we need to work really at two levels. On the one hand, it is the law that needs to change. And luckily in the United States, the law is taken more seriously than in some other countries where child marriage it is also very prevalent or more prevalent. But just changing laws will not do the trick. In the end, each of the cases you described, it's not that, as was mentioned at some point, it's not the gun against your head moment of marry now, yes or no. It is that whole subtle development that happens around it. And I think as long as we don't keep also trying to help each and every individual case, whether it's 25,000 cases every year in the United States, 12 million globally every year, these are each and every one are individuals and that need help, and that will need specific help if we want to do this. And thanks for highlighting that work needs to happen at both levels. And that also, if we want to be change makers, we need to keep our eyes open, not just for the big changes, but for each and every life, basically. I'm acutely aware of the fact that we're coming to the end of this session, and that CSW is full of events this year, thanks to Huri, who's been organizing, civil society in an impressive way, better than civil society has ever been organized, I believe, during CSW. So thank you for doing that. So I'm going to give the word back to Fraidy so that she can wrap up in time. I just want to say, the four of you, Nina, Sarah, and Fraidy, but also Kate, because although you luckily are not a survivor of child marriage, you are clearly a family member. I applaud you. You are amazingly brave women. And we are very blessed that you were willing to share your stories. But we're also very blessed that you're trying to create change for everybody who is at risk or forced or child marriage, and that you're doing that. And I really hope that many of the people who have been participating, watching the film and listen to this conversation will join, because each and every one of us can make a difference. But we can only end forced and child marriage if we work together. So Fraidy, back to you.
Well, I just don't even know who to thank first. Mabel, thank you again for taking the time to moderate this discussion, and for spearheading efforts around the globe to end child marriage. At Unchained at Last, we're members of Girls Not Brides, and that global movement that you started is extraordinary. We have until 2030 under the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to end child marriage. And if it happens, it's largely thanks to you, Mabel. So thank you for that. And Nina, Sarah, and Kate, again, thank you for being my new family. And, for Nina and Sarah, for your courage in telling your stories again and again as a way to raise awareness and prevent this from happening again. And Kate, from bringing it to the world through such a beautiful film. And that just impacts everybody who watches it. And Hootie, thank you for making all of this possible, and and for getting 25,000 people to register for this. And CSW is the world's largest annual gathering on women's rights, and to get 25,000 people interested in women's is an extraordinary achievement. And thank you to all of you who have joined us here today to watch this film and to talk about forced and child marriage in the United States. We're not going to ignore this any longer. Thanks to all of you. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.